So the first thing we're going to be talking about is that issue of online friends, of how there is that most of primary said they didn't speak to people online, yet most of secondary said they did and had friends online. So my first question is to Nicola. Why do you think there's such a big difference between primary and secondary here?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting difference, and I think it's driven a lot by the kind of developmental issues and needs that we have during adolescence. So it's a time of massive transition and change. Their bodies are changing, they're developing, you know, thoughts around their sexuality, their identity. You know, these are really big issues that they're facing. And you're more likely to turn to your peers at this age than to turn to adults. Okay, so in adolescence, we're much less likely to start disclosing and discussing things with parents and teachers, and much more likely to engage with our peers about these issues. And I think online, and particularly when there's a level of anonymity, so when it's someone that they don't know, they have a level that's less threatening. So you can discuss things. Perhaps you've never really had a discussion with someone before about your sexuality. You might not want to approach that discussion with a friend that you already have established. Okay, so you might prefer to speak to someone that you've never spoken to before online in you know, a chat room that's focused around sexuality. And it's less threatening, there's a level of anonymity there, so you're able to do that in a way that feels more comfortable on an issue that's kind of new to you, that you're still developing your thoughts and your feelings around it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Lots of changes. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Yeah, Kate?
Sorry, I find this subject really intriguing because as an adult, and this is sort of directed back to Nicola, as an adult, it scared me when all of the secondary age kids were saying, oh yeah, we've got loads of friends online that we don't know. But yet when we probed deeper with them, they were really clear about like how to protect themselves. So they were like, well, yeah, of course, like we never show our data or we never send pictures or anything. But like, is there any sort of advice that you might give to people around adults and how they manage that sort of conversation when our instincts are kind of to be fearful? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so when we speak to young people, they'll often say that they get frustrated that the kind of initial reaction of adults when it is friends that they don't have face to face, like completely new in that wider circle that the internet opens up, that you can, you know, make friends with someone who maybe is experiencing eating disorders and you don't have any friends that have eating disorders. So you kind of search out social support as well from an online environment. So I think it can be really beneficial. Young people say sometimes it's the only time they've ever felt truly heard or seen, or they've identified with someone because they've managed to find someone in a wider social network that they truly do identify with. So I think it is difficult as an adult, you know, I'm a parent myself, to not, you know, just go instinctively into protection mode and stranger danger kind of like stereotypes. But I think if we can understand the benefits for young people, and I think, like you say, they're very aware of not sharing their data, probably better than most adults are. I know a lot of parents who share a lot of photos and things of their children online, and then their children don't want those photos online. So I think young people are much more savvy when it comes to what they're sharing. It's not necessarily that they're giving their personal data, they're talking about their experience with someone else who has that shared experience that they do. So I think, yeah, having those kind of open discussions with young people and being able to realize why they're talking to people that they don't know online and what the benefits of that are, and also having that discussion about the potential risks and making sure that they're aware, you know, of what you do and don't share in terms of, you know, personal photos, images, or, you know, data.
Yeah, no, it was, and then we'll kind of we'll talk about that a little bit more as well in a bit, about that sort of the sort of difference in ages. I remember when we were young, it was that your parents warn you about all the scams online and then go online and then fall for everyone. But this and what Kate said kind of leads us quite nicely onto the next question for Bhavina, which is how can we spot when these friendships become something to worry about? Because a lot of primary kids, their conversations online were with gaming. So how can we spot the signs when it does become something we should be concerned about?
Sure. So I'll share this in the context of you as teachers hearing it in your classroom or picking it up in the playground, that kind of thing. So I think it's worth just reinforcing that playing games is ultimately about connection. It's about connection to like either the storyline, a character, but quite often it's with people. So being able to do that co-op online with your friends, it suddenly becomes fun. So that in itself is not inherently bad. That's okay. It's just understanding, who are you speaking to? Are they real friends? Just simple things. Are they real friends in real life? And if they're primary school students, we would say it's probably slightly more worrying if it's not somebody that they know. If you've never heard of that person, are they giving anything away about that person's age that suggests that there might not be something quite right about who they are speaking to? And if you as a teacher hear that and think, actually, we suspect that there might be something concerning here, raise it with the parent or carer or a family member so that they can make sure that they can speak to that child, or at least be in a setting where they are playing that game but can hear the voice chat that's going on. They can also communicate via text. And if you have parental controls set up on your consoles, you can see what they are saying as well. So our main message to parents in particular is set up those parental controls. They are there to help you. And as a teacher, though, I would just say, look out for some of those terms, derogatory terms that you might hear in your classroom and think, oh, that's not quite right. So I'll just share a few, but I'm happy to share a bit more in detail. So things like noob means newbie. So it could be, somebody being a little bit derogatory about an inexperienced player. Get wrecked, but spelt with an R. So you've just inflicted a major defeat on somebody and they're shouting, "You got wrecked," that kind of thing. And then also things like stomp, which sounds really weird, but saying "you got stomped" as well, which basically means you played a game and it went really badly. They can often be used as derogatory terms. Have a look out and listen out if this is happening between boys and girls. Girls face significantly more abuse online than boys. So it can be that you are having boys abusing girls online. So definitely keep an eye out if that's happening. And again, there is no room for that abuse. Make sure it's stamped out straight away, especially if it's coming in the classroom. Just treat it like any other insult. And for parents, encourage them to make sure that they are hearing what their children are saying when they're playing games. You can either hear it kind of if you're in the same room and the console is in the family room, so that they can then intervene, because that incident isn't actually taking place in the classroom. It's taking place in a home setting or a friend's house. And then have that conversation, encourage them to have that conversation with their child. So yeah, those are kind of be my top tips. It's not inherently bad, but there are key things to listen out to and to intervene at the right points before it gets quite bad.
And Bhavina, we can get some, maybe there's some resources you could provide. We'll do some signposting at the end for what they can provide to teachers, particularly primary teachers that might be quite new to this. And then sort of kind of going on, carrying on that sort of idea of advice from Will, what would you suggest from schools and teachers do, as well as what Bhavina said, to keep young people safe in these situations with online friends that they might never have met in real life?
Yeah, and I think, when you're comparing primary and secondary, I think there's the logical numbers that you see there. And you did say that it was only 35% of primary school children are talking to people that they're speaking to people they don't know online. But it's only as a bit, comparatively isn't only, but that's still 1 in 3 primary school children. So I think the message really is that this is something that has to be on the agenda in relation to online safety conversations with children from all ages, even beyond, even pre-primary. When we work in preschool settings, we do have messages. We're not absolutely not looking to scare young people into behavior change. That's not what we're looking to try to do. But we are there to talk about, you know, if something or someone is worrying you online, you need to tell someone. And that is the message that we have to consistently give out right from the beginning. And then the job is for those adults to be prepared for young people to come forward and talk to them about things that they are worried about. And so there's the kind of the encouraging young people to speak up, but then equipping parents and carers, and, you know, from the school's perspective, being ready for young people to come forward and talk about some things, be ready to listen about what they might be worried about. So I think that's kind of a primary thing, is this is a really important issue. In terms of the kind of the friendship element, and I'm not surprised that the numbers are of what you found, 35% of primary, 65% secondary. I'm surprised it's 65% secondary. I thought that might be higher.
Well,
But 35%.
It was specific friends. It wasn't if they speak to people online. It was specifically friends.
Fine. Okay. So then I would expect probably those numbers. We should imagine, just with the way technology is developing, those numbers will probably increase for both those ages as we go forward. I think that's a reasonable assumption. So we need to prepare for that. But I think the fundamental thing that we need to have underpinning it is, what is the key safety advice we need to be giving to young people in this space? And I think Bhavina touched upon that, is about making sure that young people know, you know, if we're talking to friends, there's a way you would behave that might be different to if you're talking to people that you don't know online. There are some safeguards that you need to have as a young person to be able to keep yourself safe in different online situations. And Bhavina was talking about, you know, not sharing your contact personal information with people that you only know online. I think that's a critical thing. It allows you to keep control of the conversation. It doesn't allow people to, outside of the environment you're in, to be able to contact you in a different format. I think that's a kind of a key element within it. And then the other advice we would give for the primary age particularly is that, you know, it doesn't matter how long you've been talking to somebody online, they're still a stranger. And it sounds obvious, but if you have been talking to somebody a lot online and you shared about yourself, you might have shared, you know, some things you haven't shared with anybody else. There might be a real connection that you have with that person, but they're still a stranger. And I think there is a blurring of relationships in that online space that can be complicated, and it's worth just trying to make sure that young people are helped to navigate those situations as best they can.
No, very true. Yeah, it's almost sort of like reminding them of the reality. I think we've got a question from Catherine.
Yeah, hi there. I find this all really interesting. Just to let you know, I'm a secondary teacher. Have you had any research or feedback about how students would prefer to be spoken to or addressed if there was a concern, let's say, from an adult or a trusted adult? Because it's obviously they don't want to have that stranger danger straight away in the conversation from what you were saying. And I find what you were just saying, Will, really interesting, like early lessons and early information about safeguarding around that from even pre-primary is really significant. But have you had any research or feedback in terms of their preference in how they would like it to be addressed, say, by a teacher or a trusted adult in a secondary school?
Catherine, do you mean in terms of, like, if they had a problem and they came to the school, how they want the teacher to manage it? Or is it a question of how they would want to have education around this topic?
Yeah, because I mean, we give obviously tried where we can, but I know from my standpoint, I'm not online day in, day out. I'm not online in terms of anywhere in a significant amount of time compared to the young people that I work with, and definitely not on the platforms that they're on either. So yeah, it's about education for me, knowing a little bit about that, but actually just in terms of what how to approach the conversation rather than just in, oh, do you know who they are? They are going to be strangers. Do you know them? You might have been talking about them for like 6 weeks, but they're, you know, do you know what I mean? Rather than, you don't want to put them off coming to you with a problem either, do you?
I'm very happy to answer that. So I think one of the things, there's different approaches, different children, different issues. So there's lots of varieties of ways you can look to approach this. But I think one thing that I would think is there is enough stories or scenarios that you can think of that relate to, even young people can help create scenarios in this space to try and then help get young people to be problem solving situations that might you could create. So there may be a story about online safety, and it might be a story where a young person had got into difficulty because of interacting with somebody that they didn't know online. And then the question is for the young people who are aware of the scenario, then to say, well, what went wrong, or what could you do, or what advice would you give? And it's trying to actually elicit young people advising this is talking about safety, but it's not necessarily talking about you. It's really allowing you as an educator to listen to what young people already know and to provide that to others. And the work that we do at Childnet, we're very actively trying to promote young people as peer educators.
Okay.
I think there is real mileage in that. And I think even with topics like this, which can seem quite big and difficult, but they are kind of ubiquitous. We focused on reliability online a couple of Safer Internet days ago, and whenever people talk about reliability, you're instinctively drawn towards fake news and content. But young people were saying, like, several times a day they have to make judgments about friend requests that they get from people that they don't know and different apps and games that they might be using. So they're having to use their judgment in relation to these contacts from people they don't. This is quite a commonplace activity for them. And I think drawing out from that experience, but trying to depersonalize way could be a really strong avenue to go. But I think even beginning those conversations is a real opener for young people to come forward and talk. After Safer Internet Day, we know that nearly half of schools said talking about online safety led to disclosures of potential online safeguarding issues in our schools, and trying to use these conversations as ways of breaking down any barriers for young people to come forward to talk is really important. And I know you were talking about the education, but in terms of how responding, when we do have some data about what barriers there are for young people to come forward and talk about things that they are worried about online, and sometimes it's about teachers not knowing which teachers come to, or teachers look like they're too busy. This is some of the results that young people are saying. We just haven't got time to talk to me. But also there's elements about not wanting to be blamed for what has happened, or feeling guilt in the way that they might have behaved online. So there's lots of different issues in there, which I think are all surmountable things that we can do to try and help reduce those barriers and get young people to come forward and talk about things that they're worried about.
Yeah, thank you. I like that. I think there was just a comment there about the peer educator stuff. I think that's a really good way forward and a good idea as well. Tapping in, I suppose, to their knowledge, that they might have more knowledge actually around some of these things, and those who are using it in a positive way to share that sometimes as well. So I like that. Thanks very much for your time on that.
Cheers.